The Stormlight Archive is a fantasy series of complexity and depth that shows people are never one-sided. We have already gone over most of our protagonists in our previous 2 videos, but there are several complicated figures that need to be discussed as well. There will be dozens of storylines in the 5th book of the series, so our goal is to try to keep track of it all. So let's go over our favorite characters, their recent accomplishments and failures from Rhythm of War, and their potential paths in Wind and Truth. Now, this is your jumping off point if you are looking to avoid spoilers for any of the books listed here on the screen. This video does not consider or cover any potential preview chapters that may have come out by the time this video is published. We've discussed Kaladin, Shallan, and the Kholins already, so today we're reviewing the other point of view characters as we left them at the end of Rhythm of War. This video series is our preparation for Wind and Truth, as we try to cover as much as possible, leading into the climactic conclusion of the first arc of the Stormlight Archive. These videos wouldn't be possible without the awesome fan art from the incredible artists of the Cosmere community. Links to each of the artists' accounts can be found in the description. Check them out. We left off last time with Gavinor, and if there's one person the young future king hates, it's Moash. So let's start with everyone's favorite former bridgeman, Moash. After killing Jezrien at the direction of the Fused, Moash was given the honorific title of Vyre, or He Who Quiets, a title formerly held by El, who we'll also cover in detail in our final video of this series. With this title, Moash is the highest ranking human in Odium's forces, and now wields Jezrien's honor blade, stolen from the Windrunners at Urithiru. Moash killed Roshon at the evacuation of Hearthstone, and attempted to convince Kaladin to take his own life, until Renarin showed him a vision of an alternate version of Moash. This made Moash regret his actions of betraying Bridge 4 even more, and he gets to the point where he can no longer take it, so he pleads to Odium personally. He now has a direct connection to Odium, who has taken his emotions so that he may feel no regret, shame, or pain, emotionally numbing the disturbed former Bridge 4 member. Odium tasked Moash with a mission to turn Kaladin into a servant of the God of Passion, and so Moash manipulated Kaladin's dreams and visions throughout the occupation of Urithiru. At the final battle of Urithiru, Moash killed Teft and his friend Fendarana, which nearly broke Kaladin as we discussed earlier. His mission from Odium nearly succeeded, though Moash never intended for Kaladin to become a servant of Odium. Before the fight for the tower was over, Moash attempted to kill Navani, though Raboniel delayed him long enough for Navani to blind him when speaking her first ideal with the sibling. On top of losing his vision, which would not heal even with Stormlight, he began feeling all of his emotions without Odium's assistance, overwhelming him with shame due to his horrible actions. Once the Fused picked him up off the snowy side of the mountains around Urithiru, Odium's effects returned, allowing him to escape his guilt and anguish once again. Moash's position as Vyre in the Fused hierarchy, his connection to Odium, and possession of the Windrunner Honor Blade are all factors ensuring that Moash will have a future in the series, but his blindness makes that future completely uncertain. Another callous action from Moash before killing Teft was cutting Lif's legs with his Honor Blade, rendering her unable to move in the final battle at Urithiru. Luckily, Lif's legs did heal with Lifelight once the tower's defenses were mended. Lif's role in Rhythm of War was small as an edge dancer remaining in the tower. She was left conscious despite the reversed effects of the tower. Maybe she is close to her 4th ideal, or perhaps her deal with cultivation was at play here. Regardless of the limited on-screen time, her one interlude was of peak interest to wider Cosmere fans. Lif noticed a pair of birds fighting in the air, known to Rosharans only as chickens, and followed the red bird to the body of an elderly man. This old man was the former Kholinar Palace house steward, Gera, who always wore rings and earrings, and was frequently seen with the red bird. This red bird was able to find Gera's body within the winding halls of the building despite fighting outside the tower for an extended period, and even expressed remorse through its chirping, something Lift likened to real words. Shortly after Lift found the body, Mraize, with his green bird, discovered her and the red bird, which led to Lift's capture and imprisonment under Raboniel. The birds clearly have some abilities that are not readily apparent, but Cosmere fans will know this species as Aviar. Thankfully, Lift is on the mend and now has the magical red bird as an additional companion along with her spren, Windle, after being released from her captivity by Venli, the newest Will Shaper. Lift's role will grow in the future books, but it's unclear what her new Aviar and her special circumstances with cultivation will bring. As we just mentioned, Venli was the one to free Lift from captivity during the occupation, and Rhythm of War was her main character book, giving us insights into her past via flashbacks. Although several of the flashbacks were somewhat known from Eshonai and Venli's previous POV chapters in Words of Radiance and Oathbringer, Venli's story is about taking responsibility for that history. Venli's growth as a Radiant seems to be deeply tied to understanding her actions leading to the true desolation in searching for forms of power. While Venli speaks her second ideal during the occupation, the words were rejected by a female voice, which could be cultivation, the sibling, or another unknown figure that has similar discretion over Radiant oaths. It seems that the last listener, as the Fused called her before discovering R'lain, simply hadn't done enough to embody the words she spoke about seeking freedom. Venli's order of Will Shapers seems to be different from most of the other Night Radiant variants. Many of the Reachers, Radiant Spren of the Will Shapers, are willing to try to bond again, but this time with the Singers, though it's likely that there will be a myriad of opinions among the Reachers who, like all Radiant Spren, are not homogeneous in their thinking. Following their failure in Kholinar, Kaladin, Shallan, Adolin, and Azure were transported across the Sea of Beads in Shadesmar by a crew of Reachers who had negative opinions of humans and their inevitably broken oaths. With the powers that Venli's Spren Tamber grants her through her oaths, Venli is able to manipulate cohesion, an ability she uses to great effect to release Lift from the Stonewall prison. Venli is also able to see into Shadesmar easily, as the other surge available to Will Shapers is transportation. Venli is able to use this ability to track Void Spren and ensure she is safe before drawing in Stormlight while surrounded by Fused and Regals in the tower. Venli is still a Regal with Envoy form, maintaining her positions with the Fused as voice for Leshwi and Raboniel. While this is true, the Void Spren in her Gemheart remains trapped by Tamber, as we learned in Oathbringer, allowing Venli to maintain all of her abilities. Venli's main goal throughout the occupation of Urithiru was to see her group of singers freed from Fused oppression, which she sees as marginally different from human oppression, looking for a way to escape and become their own group. But her status as a Radiant is what led several of the Heavenly Ones to turn against their Fused allies, turning the tide of the occupation. Leshwi was so shocked that the Spren had returned to the singers, Joy Spren appeared around her. Leshwi comforted Venli, who was ready to take the next step, but did not know what it was. Luckily, Leshwi knew that the path of the Listeners was the right one, to get out of the war and seek peace for their people, one Venli's ancestors took millennia ago. With Raboniel dead following her experiments with Navani, Venli escaped with Leshwi, R'lain, and other singers from her entourage to seek where her family had fled before the Everstorm's arrival at the Battle of Narak. They found the group of Listeners, over 1,000 strong, on the eastern edge of the Shattered Plains, and Venli speaks with Thud and her mother, Jaxlim. Jaxlim has deteriorated further in the years since Venli brought the Everstorm to Roshar, but Venli and Tamber believed that the willing Reachers could heal her with a radiant bond. At this point, the female voice tells Venli her earlier spoken oath is accepted. With the handful of Heavenly Ones, including Leshwi, to protect them, Venli thinks the Listeners will need her group to survive the new world of Surgebinders. But Thud makes it clear they are not alone as they were when entrenched at Narak, fighting the Alethi. They now have at least one Chasm Fiend at their disposal, one that Venli hypothesizes helped the Listeners escape through the chasms from Narak. Venli's role in the near future is less certain at the end of Rhythm of War than Kaladin's, Shallan's, or Dalinar's at the end of their respective books, but it's clear what her goals are now, and they are well-intentioned. Venli has taken a dark path, from being manipulated by a Void Spren into destroying her whole people, to wanting to protect them at all costs and free anyone else who so wishes. But we learned that Tamber was previously seeking Eshonai and actually bonded with the shard-bearing listener before she died in the chasms during the Battle of Narak. While Tamber was collected by Venli when they found her body, Eshonai did not die without first becoming radiant. Because she had just sworn an oath in the rushing waters of the chasms, Eshonai was able to linger in the cognitive realm for a short time. During this transition period, the Stormfather blessed Venli's older sister with one final gift by letting Eshonai ride the storm across the rest of Roshar, showing the explorer what she always wished to see before passing to the beyond. The listener's noble culture of avoiding conflict where possible and seeking their own path remains alive through Venli and the rest of her people she thought were lost forever. Leshwi and her small group of heavenly ones are the exception to the general population of Odium's forces, who remain loyal and under his control. We have some scraps of information that we can combine into a greater understanding of these forces, but we still don't have the full picture. For now, let's talk about the fused, regals, and other creatures at Odium's disposal. Through Venli's perspective, we have learned much about the fused since their arrival in the Everstorm, but not so much as to understand them as well as the Radiants. Perhaps we'll get a POV chapter, outside of Lesian's brief time in El's presence, in a future book from the Fused, but for now, we only know so much about Odium's answer to the Radiants. While they can return from death, they have to take over a new Singer body, one that is willing to accept the Fused, which kills the host upon return. There are 9 brands of Fused, parallel to the 10 orders of Radiance, but unlike the Knights who retain 2 Surge Binding abilities, the Fused are only able to access 1 Surge each. The Fused culture grants titles to esteemed members of their group, such as the Pursuer for Lesian, who has access to transportation, and the Lady of Pains for Raboniel, who has access to transformation. The Fused have been locked away since Aharietiam, and were not part of the False Desolation, and many have gone mad, some worse than the Heralds. There are plenty of deadly individual Fused, but we haven't seen them in battle in a group, aside from Leshwi and her heavenly ones. Their culture includes a central ruling body called the Nine, which has total authority, save for a direct order from Odium, over the Fused and their actions, though they may be persuaded by arguments. This is a potential parallel between the Fused and the Listeners, who held a council of each form known to them, attempting to represent everyone in their culture. We don't know if the 9 are similarly representative of the Fused brands, but Raboniel was once one of them, indicating that the 9 currently entombed Fused have not always been decision makers. We don't know how the Fused will impact the world before the Contest of Champions, but we know that one of the terms Odium enforces in the contract is that should Dalinar lose, he would become a Fused, the mechanics of which are unclear. There are still 10 days left before the contest, and we were just introduced to a new Fused in dramatic fashion, El, the Fused who is stripped of his title, which is currently held by Moash as Vyre. Perhaps the Fused will play a major role in battles leading up to the contest, or if the contest terms are somehow voided, they will become a defining force against the Radiants in the aftermath. The Singers of Roshar are capable of taking a Voidspren into their gem hearts, granting them forms of power, which the Fused call regals. While Venli's people warned against this for thousands of years, she searched for these forms with the guidance of Ulim, one of the first Voidspren to return to Roshar since Aharietiam. Venli remains a regal in envoy form, allowing her to speak nearly any language. Being a regal does not grant direct power over the surges, but the regals do have far greater ranging abilities, such as lightning strikes from storm form, which has no tie to any of the 10 surges. We know more names of regal forms from the listeners' songs passed down through the generations, but we do not know much about their abilities. These regals are used as officers and elites under the Fused in the war against the humans, but the form is only granted to a singer by standing in the Everstorm. There are creatures Odium has general control over as well, including the Thunder class. We've only seen these on a few occasions in the story to date, and most were in Dalinar's visions. Thunderclass are large creatures, towering several stories tall, made of stone, animated by a soul not unlike the Fused. These Thunderclass have glowing red eyes and an arrow-shaped head, and enormous features allowing them to destroy much of a battlefield quickly. This was very apparent at the end of Oathbringer, where a significant portion of Thalen City was reduced to rubble during the battle. Luckily, these creatures are not invincible, as Szeth is able to kill one of the souls by using Nightblood, and Renarin is able to scare the other away using his Surge Binding, following a coordinated Shardblade attack. We know from the prelude of the Stormlight Archive in Kalak's viewpoint that Thunderclasts were able to kill Heralds and Radiants, so their utility on the battlefield for Odium certainly warrants their deployment. So why haven't we seen them since the Battle of Thaylen Field? While it's possible they were used in other battles in the months since the Everstorm's arrival, it's likely these creatures will be used in the future by Odium. And finally, the Void Spren that assist the Fused and inhabit Regal Gem Hearts. The nature of these Spren is not well described yet, but we know they are of Odium, and have played hidden roles throughout the events since the discovery of the Listeners at the Shattered Plains. Ulim manipulated Venli into searching for Stormform, and other Void Spren guided the newly awakened Singers of Roshar to where the Fused were collecting them into an army. There are Void Spren capable of detecting the use of a Span Reed or other Fabrials, as well as certain surges, such as Kaladin's Lashings, but not something like summoning a Shardblade or Shallan's Light Weavings. These Void Spren also helped torture the Heralds during their use of the Oath Pact to break them, allowing for a full return of the Fuse. These different forces give Odium a great deal of tools to use in his fight to conquer the planet and be released from the Rosharan solar system, but they pale in comparison to his unmade Spren, which are rumored to be in Shinovar. We'll cover the unmade in another video, but speaking of Shinovar, we must discuss Szeth, the assassin in white, who will be the flashback character of Wind and Truth. Szeth's role in Rhythm of War was relatively minor, but it's been a year since he swore to follow Dalinar as his dedication for his third Skybreaker oath. Since then, Szeth has acted as Dalinar's bodyguard when not imprisoned in a cell in Urithiru due to how dangerous the world sees him, given his past. Szeth still carries the shadow of his soul as a lingering afterimage when he moves too quickly, and it's unclear if the effect will ever go away. And while Szeth is a full Skybreaker and has earned his Shardblade, he is yet to summon his High Spren as a blade, seeing as he wields Sword Nimi, also known as Nightblood. Nail gave the sentient sword, which is not a living Shardblade as we know them, to Szeth after rescuing him following the arrival of the Everstorm, but Nail warned Szeth not to draw the black sword from its metal sheath unless he absolutely needed to, as the sword feeds on souls, requiring Szeth to carry much more Stormlight to protect himself. Even after being drawn and destroying nearly anything in its vicinity, Sword Nimi is still unsatisfied, indicating that the sword may truly be a bottomless pit for investiture. Given the sword's capacity to destroy, Szeth keeps Sword Nimi away from his Skybreaker Spren, which is still not told Szeth its name. Obviously, Szeth's claim that the Knights Radiant were returning, the claim that earned him the title of Truthless, was correct, and Szeth has joined their ranks. Szeth flies with Dalinar and the Windrunners to confront Ishar and Tukar, and here we see more of the awesome power of Sword Nimi. When Ishar attempts to steal Dalinar's bond to the Stormfather, Szeth uses the sword to sever the connection between Ishar and Dalinar. He then is able to collapse Ishar's perpendicularity, which stuns Dalinar further. Szeth demands Ishar tell him where he got the Honor Blade, so the Herald of Luck informs Szeth that his father is dead, and that the Shin are under the control of the Unmade. Finally, Szeth attacks Ishar directly, and when the Herald raises his Honor Blade to defend, Sword Nimi takes a chip out of the Bondsmith Honor Blade. This is something Dalinar, someone well versed in shard blades, had never seen before. Upon their return to camp in Emul, Szeth decides to confront Taravangian to prevent his scheming from going any further toward harming Dalinar or the Coalition. Szeth is furious, likely still holding on to emotion from his confrontation with Ishar, and tells Taravangian to stop manipulating him. The King of Kharbranth and Yakaved is having a very stupid, emotional day, but unbeknownst to Szeth, Taravangian still has a plan. Just before Szeth kills Taravangian, Odium arrives to confront Taravangian as well, drawing the king into a vision with the shard. Taravangian grabs Sword Nimi, bringing it into the vision, and with it kills Rayz, the vessel of Odium. With the pool of power left without a vessel, Taravangian takes up the shard, ascending to godhood, leaving behind Sword Nimi unsheathed but sated from feeding on a god. Szeth does not understand how the sword was unsheathed, but believes that this is what led to the burned remains that appeared in the room, not knowing that Odium was present at all, or that Taravangian escaped the justice Szeth was attempting to serve. We'll discuss Taravangian's potential trajectories as Odium in a later video, but his connection to Szeth has been strong since the events of the Way of Kings, and it's clear that the power of Swordnimi is astronomical. Szeth's future may be affected by this newly ascended god, who seems to have regained his peak intelligence capacity, possibly leading to trouble for the Radiant Coalition and Szeth. With the knowledge of his father's death, the Shin people following the Unmade, and their original sin against him naming him truthless, Szeth is ready to set off on his Skybreaker crusade against his own people. Szeth is still not stable, despite becoming a full Skybreaker and dedicating himself to those he once tried to harm. Szeth is also lacking the surge of division, something Nail told the Shin Skybreaker he would teach him following Szeth's third ideal. It's unclear how Szeth's story will progress in Wind and Truth, but with Swordnimi and Kaladin to assist him in his mission, he has plenty of resources to claim retribution against the Shin people, or at least save them from the evil forces Ishar alluded to. It will be interesting to hopefully learn about Szeth's past prior to assassinating King Gavilar, and witness Szeth's toughest challenge to date in confronting the leaders of his homeland. Unfortunately, it's also unclear whether Taravangian, as Odium, will attempt to further manipulate Szeth while he is in Shinovar near the servants of Odium, the Unmade. Alright, admittedly, that was a lot to go over in one video. Odium's forces, Moash, Lift, the newest Willshaper Venli, and Szeth, the Shin Skybreaker set on a crusade against his own people for casting him out. We'll certainly see each of these characters progress in Wind and Truth, but we don't have future sight like Renarin, so we are left to speculation and theory. Our recap of where the main characters stand at the end of Rhythm of War and their goals looking forward is complete, leading into the climactic finish of the first arc of the Stormlight Archive. So which storyline are you looking forward to most? Who will have the biggest impact on the conclusion of Wind and Truth? Leave a comment below. If you have questions about the content or art used in this video, post them in the comments as well. We hope this has been helpful in reviewing the playing field ahead of the largest Stormlight Archive novel published to date, with likely the largest Sanderlanche in the Cosmere so far. Watch out for the next videos in the series preparing for Wind and Truth, covering the mythological figures of Roshar. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure to like and subscribe for future videos. After all, we need to unarchive all these secrets.